All right, let's dive right into an absolutely critical, literally life-saving topic in newborn care: thermal control and the prevention of neonatal hyperthermia. Welcome to this brief explainer. Providing warmth might sound like just a basic comfort, but in the medical world, especially those crucial moments right after birth, it is a cardinal principle of newborn care. So we're going to jump right in and break down exactly why this matters and how we manage it on the front lines.
Picture this very real scenario, straight out of clinical practice. A nurse hands you a baby from the postnatal ward. The baby's abdomen and feet are cold to the touch, they're lethargic, and the thermometer reads 34 degrees Celsius. This immediately highlights the incredibly high stakes of managing a baby's temperature. It requires swift, decisive action, and deeply understanding the core concepts of thermal control is exactly what prepares us for moments just like this.
To give you a brief explanation of how we tackle this, we're going to cover 5 key areas: the threat of hypothermia, understanding heat loss, the 10-step warm chain, kangaroo mother care, and managing thermal extremes.
Okay, Section 1, the threat of hypothermia. We really have to start with the problem itself, because neonatal hypothermia continues to be a massive driver of newborn mortality globally. It's absolutely crucial to understand that a cold baby isn't just uncomfortable, they're actually at risk for a cascade of severe, life-threatening complications. When that core temperature drops, it can trigger hypoglycemia, hemorrhage, metabolic acidosis, apnea, shock, and even death. Keeping a baby warm is literally about actively preventing systemic collapse. Moving right along to Section 2, understanding heat loss. To effectively prevent hypothermia, we first have to understand exactly how a newborn loses body heat to the environment. It really just comes down to basic physics, with 4 invisible enemies of infant warmth at play. First, a newborn loses heat through evaporation, especially right after birth due to the amniotic fluid on their skin. Then there's conduction, which is heat lost directly to cold surfaces, like a medical tray. Convection steals heat via cold air currents from open windows or fans. And finally, radiation pulls heat from the baby to colder solid objects nearby, like a cold wall, even if the baby isn't touching them at all.
Now you might be wondering, why are babies so much more susceptible to this than we are? Well, newborns are incredibly vulnerable because they have a much larger surface area to volume ratio. Plus, they simply lack the insulating subcutaneous fat that adults have. This is especially true for low birth weight infants, who also have a heavily reduced amount of brown fat. Brown fat acts kind of like a baby's built-in internal furnace to generate heat, and without it, they are highly, highly vulnerable.
All right, Section 3, the 10-step warm chain.
Let's pivot to the overarching solution, which begins the exact second the baby is born. We call this the warm chain, a set of 10 interlinked interventions. It actually starts before the baby even arrives by ensuring a 26 to 28 degrees Celsius delivery room. Right after delivery, it involves immediate drying with a warm towel, immediate skin-to-skin contact, and initiating breastfeeding. It also means deliberately postponing things like bathing and weighing until the baby's temperature is fully stabilized. Every single step is designed to minimize hypothermia right from birth.
Which brings us to Section 4, kangaroo mother care.
Among all the interventions in the warm chain, one of the absolutely most powerful, scientifically backed tools we have is kangaroo mother care, or KMC. Now, a fascinating takeaway here is that KMC is not just for mothers. A father, or really any willing, healthy adult caretaker, can securely hold the baby. You just place the baby in an upright, slightly extended position right between the breasts in direct skin-to-skin contact, with their hips flexed so they cling to the adult in a frog-like pose. It is basically a highly practical, low-tech incubator.
But for this to actually be effective, this skin-to-skin contact simply cannot be rushed. The guidelines emphasize that each session must last for a duration of at least 1 uninterrupted hour. You only stop when the baby signals they're uncomfortable by wriggling or crying. The longer you do it, the better the thermal benefit.
And beyond just keeping the baby warm, KMC acts as a holistic medical intervention. It significantly improves emotional bonding, boosts maternal milk production, and increases exclusive breastfeeding rates. Amazingly, it also actively reduces the risk of respiratory tract and hospital-acquired nosocomial infections, which ultimately improves the baby's weight and reduces their overall hospital stay. It's a total game changer.
Finally, Section 5, managing thermal extremes.
The crucial point here is knowing exactly how to measure and react when a newborn's temperature falls out of that normal 36.5 to 37.5 degrees Celsius range. We grade the severity like this. Between 36.4 and 36.0, the baby is in cold stress. Once they drop below 36 degrees, it becomes moderate hypothermia, and below 32 degrees is severe.
This is a stark reminder that clinical signs like lethargy and poor feeding might be subtle at first, so checking the core temperature is absolutely vital to dictate the urgency of our response.
So, if a baby slips into mild hypothermia, meaning that 35.5 to 36.4 degree range, our first step is to immediately re-warm them using skin-to-skin KMC. If KMC just isn't practical, we utilize a functioning radiant heater or room heater. We also need to immediately swap out any cold clothing for warm, multiple layers and cover their head with a cap. All the while, we're monitoring their temperature every 15 to 30 minutes to make sure they're actually stabilizing.
But we also need to look at the other end of the spectrum and contrast hypothermia with hyperthermia. A baby can also become dangerously hot, exceeding 37.5 degrees Celsius. This could just be from environmental factors, like overdressing them in the summer months or accidentally leaving them unattended under a radiant warmer. However, a high temperature also requires a very diligent investigation to rule out a severe underlying infection, like sepsis. If a baby does have a fever, we have to act logically. Move them to a cooler room, get them away from any heat sources, and undress them to room temperature. Now, here's a critical detail. If their temperature spikes above 39 degrees Celsius, you can sponge them with tepid water. But never, never use cold or ice water. At the same time, provide frequent breastfeeds to replace fluids and thoroughly examine every hyperthermic baby for signs of infection.
Ultimately, thermal control doesn't just end when the hospital stay does. When families are discharged, parents have to be counseled on providing extra care at home. This means making sure the baby is well covered, keeping a warm room, continuing exclusive breastfeeding, and perhaps most importantly, identifying the danger signs that tell them they need to seek medical help immediately.
Protecting fragile newborns from thermal extremes requires constant vigilance, from the delivery room right to the family home. So it all really comes down to this. When that thermometer drops, and every single second counts, will you be ready to maintain the warm chain and save a life? Thanks for joining me on this brief explainer. Catch you next time.